In this video, we're going to talk about why you might want to grab a gaming console in addition to your Steam Deck or gaming PC, and I'm going to tell you which one I think is the one worth grabbing. So over the past few years, as someone who splits their time between the PS5 and a gaming PC along with the Steam Deck, I'm grouping those together as just like PC gaming because I mainly use Steam on both of those platforms. I've noticed this bizarre trend where power is increasing over and over again on PC, but because of a lot of factors I'll get into later in the video, game performance has fallen so far behind on PC that there are just certain games where I know I'll grab them on console instead of grabbing them on PC. And honestly, it's been a lot better. There are countless examples of games that I've picked up for PS5 because they just don't run right on PC, and there are countless other examples of games that are actually finished and well optimized that I want to play on PC because I want the freedom of being able to play them on my TV, on my monitor with my mouse and keyboard, and of course on the go or in my bed or on the couch with my Steam Deck with the save transferring and everything like that. But during the beginning of the PS4 generation, I would say that wasn't the case. Like, that's when I got my first real beefy gaming PC, and it was kind of crazy how fast I stopped buying games on the PlayStation ecosystem outside of their first party games and just bought everything on PC. And I was getting 1080p, 1440p, even up to 4K without DLSS because this was before DLSS was even a thing, and my games were performing perfectly fine on PC. There were weird outliers, of course, but I always noticed that if they didn't run right on PC, they also didn't run right on consoles because the core problem was optimization or just underbaked games. So when I was writing out this video, I was looking at the competition and I thought it was going to be clear cut in one direction, but there are a lot of options that all provide good benefits between the Series S and X, the PS5 and PS5 Pro, and of course the Nintendo Switch and Switch 2. So we're going to go through this brand by brand in this video and talk about how these ecosystems complement each other. So if you're one of the people who's been considering getting a console in addition to your Steam Deck, you'll know exactly which one you want to get. So we're going to start out with what I'm most familiar with, which is the PlayStation ecosystem. I've been doing my PS Ready channel for 3 or 4 years now, I want to say, and I spend a lot of time on my PS5. So I've got a pretty good breadth of knowledge when it comes to this subject. So as far as hardware goes, you've got a lot of options. If you want to go cheap, you could get a refurbished or used launch PS5. It's not the prettiest console in the world, but you can make it look a lot nicer if you get some black plates for it or any of the myriad of colors you can purchase directly from Sony. But if you look at Amazon or Etsy, you can actually save a lot of money buying third-party plates. But if you don't care what it looks like and you're just trying to go for the cheapest route possible, I would just go for a launch unit used or refurbished because unlike every other PlayStation generation, this console has virtually no hardware issues that are widespread. There's no yellow light of death. The disk drive doesn't break like it did on the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 4 Pro. And unlike both of those consoles, which ended up sounding like aircraft carriers after a couple of years of use, this thing is dead quiet. I still use my launch PS5 on my upstairs desk all the time, and I'm consistently impressed that this 5 or so year old machine is performing just as well as it did the day I bought it, even with all the extra firmware, software, and everything else updates that Sony has thrown at it. So if you want to go cheap, that's the one to go with. If you're someone who's not penny pinching to the max, the PS5 Slim is perfect for you. It comes in 2 variants. There's a digital model and a disk drive model. The disk drive model is $500, so the original price of the PS5, but the digital model, they raised the price by $50 to $450. With that being said, it goes on sale constantly, and you can get it in a bundle right now with Astrobot, which is kind of like a marquee game for the console. You of course get the pack-in game Astro's Playroom, which is great, but if you wanted a full 3D platformer that's one of the best I've ever played, you got to get Astrobot. It won so many Game of the Year awards last year, and the trophies, which are achievements on PlayStation, are really worth going out of your way to get. The PS5 Pro is the third option, and it's kind of the hardest to recommend, mainly because it's $700 and doesn't include a disc drive. If you're on PC, you probably don't care all that much about physical games because Steam is all digital already. They used to sell box Steam games that would come with a key and a disc. I don't think they do that anymore, and there's no cheaper option though. Like, it's $700 without the disc drive. If you want the disc drive, it's an extra $80. It's actually not as difficult to recommend to PC players as I thought, because if you're on PC, you're used to good performance, you're used to higher frame rates, you're used to higher resolutions, and if you want that experience on a console, you could get the PS5 Pro and it'll run games really well. Like games like Monster Hunter Wilds that run like crap on PC and basically require you to use frame generation, that is not the case on PS5 Pro, and it's got the smoothest console performance across the board. And there are a lot more games like Monster Hunter Wilds that just simply, for some reason, run a lot more consistently on console. They might not run at higher resolutions or higher settings, but if you have to make that sacrifice anyway on PC to get similar performance, and you might not even get that performance in the long run anyway, it doesn't really matter, especially considering you're playing this thing on a TV for the most part, so you're sitting far enough away where you probably wouldn't even notice if the settings were turned up that much higher or if the upscaling wasn't being cranked to the max. And if you're someone whose only option when it comes to PC gaming is the Steam Deck, like you don't have another gaming PC, if you want to get as close to having a PC while also retaining the console style operating system and just ease of use, like download a game and play it, no bullshit settings or anything to mess around with, you don't have to limit frame rates or anything like that, I feel like the PS5 Pro is your first good step into eventually building a PC, because it's going to show you what decent to good performance is like, and it'll probably convince you to build a PC if and when part prices kind of level out and plateau and actually become affordable and actually give you good performance. Like the upgrade from the last Nvidia generation, the 40 series to the 50 series, is laughable for the prices they're charging. So yeah, I thought the PS5 Pro would be hardest to recommend, but like if you're looking for a console and you just want the no bull best performance possible, I think it's definitely worth the $700. Like I have 3 PS5s. I have the PS5 launch model, PS5 Slim, PS5 Pro. They're all spread around my house, and I default to the Pro because again, it just gives me the best performance possible on the PlayStation ecosystem. And the real linchpin of the PS5 Pro is PSSR. It's like Sony's competitor to things like FSR, XeSS, and DLSS. Depending on how much effort the developers put into utilizing it, it can be better or as good as FSR 3, and FSR 4 is actually using a lot of the technology that Sony developed for PSSR because it is that good. A lot of the first party games from Sony utilize PSSR in excellent ways, and thankfully a lot of the third party stuff that didn't use it so well got later updates that updated the version of PSSR they were using to make it work good. And it's good upscaling. Like it really smooths out the edges, it brings out the highlights and the resolution of people's faces. It doesn't give you that shimmering or weird pixelated edges that you would get on characters' hair with FSR. It is a noticeable upgrade. But the real reason I have no trouble recommending a PS5 as your add-on console to the Steam Deck is the game situation. So first-party Sony games are a weird sort of thing to talk about because a lot of them have come to PC, and for the most part, they've done a good job porting these games over. The big downside is you generally have to wait for it. Outside of live service games like Helldivers 2, most of the games take at least a year to be ported over to PC, and a lot of people say they're happy to wait, but I've noticed that a lot of those game releases line up with other big new game releases, and then you're kind of forced to pick or choose between an old Sony game or a brand new game that just came out from someone else like From Software or Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, for example. And I think 9 times out of 10, people will choose the newest game possible because of the hype cycle around it. If you're someone who penny pinches and just waits as long as possible, you could wait, but they generally only give you a $10 discount on the first party Sony games when they come over to PC. So like you got to weigh it out for yourself if it's worth it or not to you to play these games first. But generally speaking, Sony does a good job launching games in a good state on day one, and I have no problem playing them on console. Like I'll be playing Death Stranding 2 and Ghost of Yotei day one on PS5 just because I trust Sony to put out a good product, and I don't think I'm going to get really that much extra stuff by waiting for them to come to PC. But the real secret sauce that Sony has is that when it comes to high performance consoles, they've kind of won against Xbox. So not only are you getting those first party Sony games on the PlayStation, you're also getting first party Xbox games. So stuff like Forza Horizon 5, Halo Master Chief Collection is going to be coming soon, Avowed, Indiana Jones. Like every game that Xbox makes going forward will come to PlayStation 5. So really, the only games you're missing out on with PlayStation 5 are Nintendo games, and you just got to decide whether or not that's worth it for you. The biggest drawbacks, obviously, are that Sony games come to PC eventually, and also it's the most similar console to a PC. So if you already have a big beefy gaming PC, I probably wouldn't go with the PlayStation console because Xbox also releases their games on PC in addition to Sony. And so it would be a real lateral move. Like if you just don't have time and you don't want to build a PC or you're budget limited, PS5 Pro all day long. But yeah, it's hard to recommend in some ways, easy to recommend in others. You got to make the decision for yourself. But yeah, we talked about Xbox a little bit. Let's keep doing it because the Xbox Series X and S are my next choice on this list. And it's the easiest one to not recommend you buy in addition to a Steam Deck. Like it's weird what their hardware situation is because their hardware itself, whether it's the Series S or X, is good. You just really need to decide up front if you're someone who's interested in Game Pass because you're missing out on a lot of third-party games, stuff like Final Fantasy VII Remake, Final Fantasy Rebirth, a lot of Square Enix's stuff. There's also weird offshoot Capcom games that haven't come to Xbox. A lot of indie games are choosing to skip Xbox. And of course, all of the Sony exclusives are never going to come to Xbox. Even games like Horizon Lego Adventures that they've released on Nintendo Switch, they purposely leave Xbox out because they're not going to give them any sort of win. So if you want an Xbox, you got to decide whether or not you want Game Pass, because if you pay for Game Pass Ultimate, you get all of their AAA games day one, which is cool. You can pay for early access to get all the extra stuff like season passes and future DLC releases and everything like that. I generally don't. And then also you get Game Pass on PC. The reason I still wouldn't recommend that for people who have a Steam Deck is unless you want to stream these games over the cloud, which I don't because streaming sucks, there's no way to really play them on your Steam Deck. There's no integration with Steam to allow you to take advantage of your Xbox Game Pass subscription. So if you're someone who spends a lot of time on the Steam Deck and a new game comes out that runs well on the Steam Deck from Xbox, like Forza Horizon 5, for example, you're probably just going to spend the $70 on it on Steam. And then like, why are you paying for Game Pass at all at that point? Also, looking a little bit farther into the future, Xbox has set their sights on a different enemy. They're no longer fighting Nintendo and Sony. They're putting all of their games that they possibly can on the Switch 2 and the PS5 and PS5 Pro. They've set their sights on Valve. They're going to basically get rid of the current Xbox operating system and merge Windows into the Xbox operating system to kind of give us their take on SteamOS. So when you boot into Windows on the next Xbox hardware, it's going to be like booting into a game console, but underlying all of that will just be straight up Windows 11. So you'll be able to play your Steam games, which is interesting. You'll be able to play your Epic Store games, and you'll be able to play your Xbox Game Pass games. And I obviously don't love that future outside of the fact that it provides good competition to keep Valve updating SteamOS 3.0. I don't like it because I really like SteamOS. I think it's a great sort of replacement alternative console sort of ecosystem for PC gaming. And every time Xbox kind of puts their fingers in stuff, it really ends up being worse for the industry as a whole. But regardless of game quality, hardware quality, whatever you want to talk about with Xbox, the biggest reason I don't think it's worth owning one in addition to a Steam Deck is no matter what, whether you're the most diehard Game Pass subscriber, you're going to play all those Game Pass games on Xbox, there is going to be one game that comes out that runs really well on the Steam Deck, and then you're going to find yourself double dipping. And I cannot stand double dipping. Like if I'm paying for a subscription service that has a game for free and then I buy that game on Steam, I legitimately feel bad. That's why I don't pay for Game Pass. I don't pay for PS Plus Extra. I don't care. I just want to play my games on Steam, and I've made that decision. It just works out better in the long run. So yeah, as far as all three of these sections go, the one I would recommend the least as an addition to your Steam Deck is an Xbox console. But then you've got the weird outlier in Nintendo. And honestly, I feel like this one is good to own in addition to your Steam Deck. Now, I own a Nintendo Switch OLED, and I have played it recently for games like Metroid Prime Remastered or Super Mario Wonder, but it's obvious that in the tail end of the Switch's life cycle, they've been saving the big stuff for the Switch 2. So a lot of the stuff that's come to the console just isn't interesting to me. It's stuff they would have relegated to the 3DS before, so I just haven't picked it up and used it so much. But now that the Switch 2 is around the corner, even though it has a pretty steep buy-in at $450 with $70 and $80 games, the biggest boon of having a Nintendo Switch in addition to a Steam Deck is the fact that you're going to get games on the Switch 2 that will never come to PC. Now, every time I talk about this, there's a lot of computer science degree holders in the comments saying, oh, I just emulate all my Nintendo Switch games on my Steam Deck and it works great. And I'm glad for you, but for the average person who maybe only owns a Steam Deck, you know, it's their first little baby step into PC gaming, doing things like emulating the Switch is very difficult. It's hard to find the emulators for one thing because Nintendo's taken them down. Dumping your game cartridges is extremely difficult, and if you try to download them in illicit ways, I mean, your odds of getting a virus or some extreme malware on your PC or Mac are like absolutely astronomically insane, to where it's not worth it unless you have a deep understanding of exactly what you're doing. And there just generally aren't a lot of YouTube videos out there that explain how to do it because Nintendo is ruthless with their copyright strikes and takedowns. So it's just not worth it to make a tutorial video on emulating Nintendo Switch games. So while it can theoretically be done, well, it can materially be done because people are doing it all the time. And I'm sure there will be a Switch 2 emulator very soon after the Switch comes out. For the average layman, the person who moved from console to PC and still wants to hang on to that console ecosystem, emulation just isn't the best path to go down, at least in my opinion. And if you are someone who wants to play games like Metroid Prime 4, you want to play stuff like Donkey Kong Bonanza or Mario Kart World, I mean, the Switch is your only option. Third-party games don't really matter on that handheld because from everything I've seen, while it does have a 1080p screen, it is aggressively using DLSS to upscale games, just like the Steam Deck does with FSR, and the Steam Deck will overall have an easier time running a lot of the third-party games because you're only pushing to an 800p screen. And while the Steam Deck's chip is 3 years old, the chip that Nintendo is using in the Switch 2 is also old, despite being from Nvidia. So it's not like they have some generational leap over the Steam Deck, and they're also running it at an extremely low TDP, especially in handheld mode, to make sure battery life isn't 45 minutes. And regardless of how much complaining there is on the internet about the cost of the games, the cost of the accessories, the cost of the hardware itself, if there's one console I think people will still show up for regardless, it's the Switch 2. It's backwards compatible with the original Switch. It's giving us remasters and remakes of games like Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and games that ran like absolute trash on the original Switch like Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are all getting free patches to run better on the Switch 2. So if you're interested in those games and you've built up a big backlog of Switch games, or you want to get some deals before the Switch 2 comes out and have a library of first-party Nintendo games ready to go, I mean, the Switch honestly kind of feels like a no-brainer when it comes to having a console in addition to the Steam Deck. It's funny because everyone loves to pit the Steam Deck and the Switch against each other, but they're really just going for different audiences. Like the Steam Deck is the PS5 to the Switch of PC gaming, in the sense that it's going for a harder core ecosystem slash user base of people who want to play games like Elden Ring day one, or they want to play games like Ghost of Tsushima or Forza Horizon 5 or Atomfall. And I'm sure those games will come to the Switch too, but keeping in mind that if you buy them on Steam, you'll be able to play them if you ever do build a PC down the line, or just swap them over completely for free when the Steam Deck 2 comes out. I think it would be pretty smart to at least buy a cheaper Switch 1 and use that as long as you possibly can, or buy a Switch 2 for those first party games and just relegate all the third party stuff to your Steam Deck. So yeah, even with my bias towards PlayStation, I think if I had to rank your options, it would be number one, Nintendo Switch 2. I mean, it's a handheld. You already know how to use it. You're going to play a lot of first party Nintendo games on it. You're going to be able to go back and play games you missed. That's my plan. I want to play games like Tears of the Kingdom that I was waiting for hardware that could actually run the game to come out. And I know it's $450, and adding that on to the lowest price of $400 for the Steam Deck adds up to $850. That's only $150 more than the PS5 Pro costs without a disc drive. So, you know, it's not really that big of a deal in the long run if you've got the money to buy a separate console. It's really the cheapest way to do it outside of something like the Xbox Series S, but I don't think that thing's worth buying in 2025 for sure. Second place, I think, is the PS5 or PS5 Pro. Big benefits are great hardware that runs well. You get the DualSense controller, which is really cool with its haptic feedback and adaptive triggers. That also works on PC and the Steam Deck, so you'll use that controller on your Steam Deck and your PS5, which is cool. And, you know, it has a lot of first-party games from Sony that come out first on PlayStation 5, and they actually finish their games and make games that feel like they're worth full price. So you won't have to wait to play them on PC at least a year or more. And then in third place, the one I wouldn't even consider buying at all if you're going for an additional console to your Steam Deck is the Xbox Series X and S, mainly because the next gen version is right around the corner and it's basically going to be a PC. And also, if you really want to utilize your Xbox console to its fullest potential, you need Game Pass. And it's not worth having Game Pass if you have a Steam Deck because you can't take advantage of it. So yeah, that about brings me to the end of this video. It's a little bit different than what I usually do, which is news-based content, but it's something I've been thinking about a lot as someone who plays on both Steam Deck and PlayStation 5, and I just thought it'd be interesting. I know a lot of the more hardcore dedicated Steam Deck fans are mainly PC players, and that's fine because, you know, most of my time is spent on the Steam Deck and my main gaming PC, but it's still interesting to think about maybe upgrading to a console and waiting out the weirdness that we're in with PC gaming right now. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. The best thing you can do to help me out if you did is subscribe and set your notifications to all. As always, guys, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching and shape on.